Hello, Movie Mavens! Welcome back to the B Movies blog. My name is Bailey, and I put the B in B Movies. And if you can't tell by my wonderful cartoon Lizzie McGuire costume, it's October. It's the best month out of the year. It's my favorite month out of the year. We made it. So excited to be here. Um, just right off the top. So excited. I hope all of you are as excited as I am. And just to go ahead and plug my personal Instagram account up top. This month I will be doing Night Around Film Street 31-day movie challenge, and what I do is every day I go with one of their themes, but I also do something creative, so you can find more costumes, more makeup looks. I have a few ideas to bake some things this year, or cook some things. I make playlists, so if you follow me over at Lisa_Frankenstein_, you can find that. I also do, because I am a crazy person, I also do 13 days of costumes. They aren't all big elaborate costumes. I don't spend a whole lot of money. It just wouldn't be practical for me as a human being. But I do 13 looks all throughout the year. This will obviously be one of them. But yeah, so for the last 13 days, including Halloween, you can find that as well. And then up top, as a reminder, I'll say the only thing, I love my wigs, but I always get wig hair right in my face. Another thing, really quick, as a reminder up top to get housekeeping started, we will be doing 7 days of content this month. So Monday through Saturday, you can get regular blog posts over at bmovies.blog, and then bite-sized Sundays. And to recap for bite-sized Sundays this month, they won't be about one movie specifically. It'll be a curated slider post with 10 movies in a specific genre. So for example, today's Bite-Sized Sunday teaser, which, as a reminder as well, you can only get the teasers here, and Bite-Sized Sunday posts only live on Instagram. So they don't, if you go to bmovies.blog, they won't be available there. You can only get them over on our Instagram at bmovies channel, same as our YouTube. So the Bite-Sized Sunday teaser for this Sunday is The Ghosts of Halloween Past Have Entered the Chat. So the movies will have something to do with that teaser. So now that we have Bite-Sized Sunday all wrapped up, let's go ahead and go through this week's blog roundup. And I will also say this video is going to be a lengthy one, but I'm very excited because we're actually going to do 2 different deep dives. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, I really want these October videos to be really big sources of content for y'all. It's my favorite month out of the year, and I just really want to share that passion with all of you. And 2, I just could not choose between 2 of the blogs that we're doing this week. So so fair warning up top, this video is going to be a lengthy one, but I promise it's going to be worth it. So for the blog roundup, on Monday we talked about the Evil Dead franchise. It's one of my favorites, something I share with my brother-in-law, and it's just groovy, baby. Tuesday we talked about Saw. It's my guilty pleasure franchise. I don't really believe in guilty pleasures, but if I had to classify a guilty pleasure, it's a Saw franchise. I own all of them. I am obviously, next weekend I'm going to go see Saw 10. Super excited. I'm doing that as a double feature with hopefully Dix the Musical. So fingers crossed that it all works out. It's the most unhinged double feature. Shout out to my friend Brooke, who is always down to do the unhinged and the weird with me. Very much appreciate you, babe. So looking forward to Saw 10. On Wednesday, it's my review of No One Will Save You. If you follow me on my personal Instagram, I talked about this movie. I think it's going to be very divisive. I loved this movie. I can't recommend it enough. But I don't think everyone is going to feel the same way. I think it's going to be like Asteroid City, where I loved it, but then a lot of people think it's one of Wes Anderson's worst movies, and it's in my top 5 Wes Anderson movies. So, do what you will. It's one of the pieces where I really break down a lot of the symbolism. So, know that there are spoilers. So, if you don't want the movie spoiled, go ahead and check it out first, and then come back to this piece, and hopefully you liked it as much as I did. On yesterday, we talked about movies that I think should get the Bring It On, Cheer or Die treatment. That's going to be one of our deep dives today. we're not going to go super in depth, but I have a couple of actress recommendations. I just think it's a really fun concept, thinking of the teen movies that I grew up with and just kind of reimagining them as these weird, deranged horror plots. And then, Friday, which is today, I don't know how time works, y'all, we talked about feminine horror reimaginings, like with 2019's Black Christmas. We also talked about the new Slumber Party Massacre. I really love this new wave of horror that is emerging, where it's all of these feminist reimagining of classically sexist or misogynistic horror. Like, I wouldn't necessarily call the original Black Christmas, I think it's borderline, but I just really like this horror reimagining that really empowers women and lifts up women in a way that we haven't traditionally been seen in horror. And so I go on a soapbox, fair warning, but it's still a great read, and I think you'll really enjoy it. And then tomorrow, this is the weirdness, but it's okay. So tomorrow, we're going to be talking about Greylock, but I'm also going to do a deep dive today because I really want to talk about this horror analog series. I think it's yet again another one that I found on Baz's channel, which he hit his 100,000 subscribers, so congratulations to him. Subscribe if you haven't, because he does a lot of reaction content, but again, it's not in a way he's not exploiting creators. He very much lifts them, plugs them, interacts with their accounts, so give him a follow. But I really want to talk about it. So this is the one thing with us releasing 6 pieces, is that our videos come out Friday. So we're going to talk about this piece tomorrow, but there are some pieces we may talk about in the Friday video too. So I guess, depending on how you see it, it's either a very good thing or a very weird thing. Either way, it is what it is. So, on that note, I think all of the housekeeping is out of the way. There's one, I almost forgot it again. So something I forgot to mention last week was that Cam was actually the 100th blog published on the bmovies.blog. It's crazy to me to think we've made it this far. January is when we soft launched, so our year anniversary is like the end of January, and it's already October, so that's nuts to me that we're weeks away from the year anniversary. So I just want to give a thank you to everyone who has shared, who's liked, who's subscribed, who has just supported us in any way, because we've done the 100th blog. And so that is something I forgot to mention in the last video, but Cam was actually our 100th blog, and so it worked out that that's what we did a deep dive on. So yay. So yeah, I think now that officially all of the business is out of the way, we can go ahead and start with our deep dive on movies that I think should get the Bring It On, Cheer or Die treatment. And so like I said, we're not going to spend a lot of time here, but there are a few things that I wanted to touch on that I think are just fun. So if you read the piece yesterday, Bring It On, Cheer or Die was released last year, and it was a horror take on the Bring It On franchise. It was the first horror film that they've done. I think it's very high camp, it's very over the top, but I personally really enjoyed it. And so I think there are some other films that could be really fun if we decided to reimagine them as horror movies. The first one being Mean Girls, and my plot twist is when someone starts killing off all of the popular girls, it's up to Katie to go undercover with the help of Janice. And I think that Catherine Langford from 13 Reasons Why, she was in Knives Out, I think she'd be a wonderful Katie. I think that Ruby Cruz from Bottoms would be wonderful as Janice. And I think that Catherine Isabel from American Mary and Ginger Snaps would be wonderful as Miss Norberry. And I think that those would be some ideal casting choices for me personally. Next up, we have John Tucker Must Die. So for John Tucker Must Die, what I was kind of thinking is, so John Tucker, he's cheated on all of these girlfriends, and so as revenge, they accidentally kill him. But he comes back as something horrible. And Kate, who's played by Brittany Snow in the original movie, must help these girls defeat this like reincarnated monster. It's kind of like Tamara is what I was thinking in my head, is similar to Tamara, or like sometimes they come back. And I was thinking Jenna Ortega would be great as Kate, and I think Kaya Gerber would be wonderful as Carrie. I think that those are two just perfect casting decisions for this, if it were to ever happen. Next up, we have High School Musical. And I see this as extremely high camp. And my take would be that Sharpay will do anything to get the lead in the spring musicale. And so everyone that she kills, every death scene is like its own song. So it's a musical number for all of these people that she kills off. I think it'd be very funny. And I honestly kind of think Lily James would be a really good Sharpay, because she was wonderful in Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, and I think she'd be great as Sharpay. Next up, we have Sleepover, which, if you remember, had Alexa Pena-Vega in it, and she has to like complete like this ultimate list of, it's like these, I think they're getting ready to go into high school, and there's like this list of like impossible scavenger hunt tasks. And so I think it would be fun to take it as like, there's a reason no one's ever completed this list. Like, once you start, you can't stop. And I honestly think that Rachel Sennett would be wonderful as Julie. She is so good in Bodies, Bodies, and Bottoms both, which I would argue that Bottoms kind of teeters on a horror comedy. I think she'd be wonderful. Next up, we have Clueless, which I kind of envision as almost a single white female. Like, Cher takes Ty under her wing, but unfortunately for Cher, she doesn't know about Ty's past, and there's a reason why Ty had to move to this new town. And I see, honestly, Grace Van Patten as Cher from Tell Me Lies. That show is so awful, but I watched every episode. No offense to Grace Van Patten, it's that show. Everyone's awful on that show. And then my dream casting for Ty, because I'm a huge Chappelle Rowan fan, get her in there as Ty. I think that she would be wonderful, and I think it would be very fun. Next up, we have 10 Things I Hate About You. And there's a reason why the Stratford sisters don't date. And I think there are two lanes that you could take this in. I think it could be a Teeth type situation where they don't know, or they are fully aware and try purposely not to date. But either way, I think that would be really fun to be like, there's a reason why they don't date. It's just no one else knows why. And I think that Sophie Thatcher from Yellow Jackets and the Boogeyman would be wonderful as Kat, and Olivia Holt from the most recent season of Cruel Summer would be a wonderful Bianca. And so and I think that they would play very well off of each other. So next up, we have A Cinderella Story. In my head, I see Sam as kind of like a white witch, and her stepmother and her stepsisters are into black magic, and so they need a true love sacrifice. So Sam has avoided falling in love, but she meets Austin Ames in this chat room, and it becomes love at first sight, and so now she has to save Austin from her stepmother and stepsisters. And I think Jacob Elordi would be great as Austin from Euphoria. He's playing Elvis and Priscilla. I think that he would be wonderful. I think Maya Hawke is Sam, because I just love Maya Hawke. I think she's wonderful, and I think she can play good or bad. Obviously, we've seen good in Stranger Things, bad in Do Revenge. I think she'd be great. And then just as a fun casting, I don't think Lauren Graham would ever do it, but I would love to see Lauren Graham in a horror movie, especially something like this where it's like very fun and very almost whimsical. And we know she can sing, and in case there was any reason for her to sing, because she sang in Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist and then the infamous scene in one of the last episodes of Gilmore Girls. So I just think it would be really fun to have her in there. I don't think she'd ever do it, but that a girl can hope and dream. Next up, we have The Kissing Booth, where I think it'd be fun if Elle was cursed, And so she signs up to do this kissing booth, and it turns out everyone she kisses dies. And it's almost kind of like Final Destination. Like, again, like kind of like Teeth Final Destination, like a hybrid. And so the kicker is she kisses her best friend's older brother. And so she has to race against time to save her crush. And I think that Finn Wolfhard as Lee, who is the younger brother, I think he'd be wonderful. I think he'd be wonderful in this. And then next up we have To All the Boys I've Loved Before. I saw it as almost like a Kill Bill style film where Lara Jean has like a string of bad ex-boyfriends, and she, one by one gets revenge. And honestly, keep Lana Condor. If she would do it, she's wonderful. I love her. Just keep her in it. Why not? Do I think she'd ever do it? No. But again, a girl can dream. And then lastly, we have The Princess Diaries. Mia's kidnapped by her grandmother, finds out she's royalty, and in order to claim her throne and her lineage, she has to play deadly games. So kind of like Saw, Cheap Thrills, and I think Hunter Schafer would be perfect as Mia. Hunter Schafer from Euphoria. I think she'd be wonderful as Mia, like dream casting. So those are all of the movies I think should get the Bring It On Cheer or Die treatment. So that will end our first deep dive for today. So now our second deep dive, and buckle up because this is going to be a long one, is the Greylock analog horror series. And this was created by Rob Gavagan. It came out, I believe it started a few months ago, and it seems like the first season might be done. I haven't seen or heard anything that's officially like calling this season ended. Like with Midwest Angelica, like we talked about previously, the creators commented and said end of Act 1. I haven't seen anything like that personally. Excuse me, but I'm kind of interpreting that we're at the end of an act, or maybe the mid finale, something like that. So again, like I said earlier, this was another Baz discovery. Rob Gavagan has done horror content in the past, and this analog series is wonderful. But before I start, I want to give some content warning and some trigger warnings, because there are several things within here that I think could really be triggering to people. So first off, gore, home invasion, technically infant death, but we'll talk about it when we get there. It's not very forward facing. It's just implied that something happens. And so just that is a trigger warning. Assault, there's a lot of mutilation, and anything else that falls along the lines of anything I have mentioned. And additionally, like the gore, it's pretty bad. We'll talk about it in here, but there are like some mutilated photos, and so anything like that. Additionally, there are flashing lights and images. This is a horror analog series. We will never get out unscathed. And so I wanted to give a warning that there are flashing lights as well as loud sounds that could be potentially harmful or hurtful to photosensitive viewers. So if you have any conditions or anything where loud noises, sudden flashing lights, sudden just jump scares, anything in that vein, this may not be the analog horror series for you, or you might want to have someone else watch it first who knows your condition a little bit better. So I just want to give those warnings up top. So let's get into it. So as of the time of filming this, there are 9 videos in this series. And so we're just going to go tape by tape like we did for Midwest Angelica. I have some theories at the end. But with this one, I'm not as convinced on my theories as I was for Midwest Angelica. So these are more I thinks rather than I'm pretty sures. So let's dive into Rob Gavagan's Greylock. So to start off, we have tape 001, which I'm just going to call them tape 1, tape 2, etc., but it's technically tape 001. I'll also give you the names. This one just don't have a name. It's just tape 001. So there isn't a lot to the first tape. We hear the name Simiodine, which will set us up for the series. They are, spoiler, the antagonist of this series, or the big bad. However, to me, it just serves as exposition that the content we're seeing wasn't and isn't supposed to be revealed. It's very short. I think it's like 1.5 minutes long. And it's someone breaking into a server. And so it's just, for me, this is just alluding to the fact, like, oh, we're not supposed to be seeing or watching this. Someone is hacking in, or once had access and knows how to go around the back way because they disable the need for a password and credentials. So that's all there really is to tape number 1. Tape 2 is called To the Mountain. We see footage of someone driving. They're listening to a radio sermon. It's very Children of the Corn to me, audio-wise, and then video-wise, it reminds me a lot of You Were on the Fastest Available Route from Local 58. Throughout the video, we're shown images of the woods. We're given some altar-looking imagery, and it's met with distortion and tape interference. It's very clear something very, very bad happened here, as there's blood in the snow and the distorted audio, which is always a big indicator within horror analog series that something bad happened. And the only part that confuses me about this tape is I'm not 100% sure if this is, they're looking for some urban legend. Like, the town that I grew up in has an urban legend about one of the highways where, like, if you flash your lights, you'll see this, like, kind of cryptid-y figure. I'm not sure if in the video, if it flashes the lights. I personally can't see anything. I ran it back like 4 times. I didn't see anything, but it cuts to them flashing the headlights and then suddenly, like, speeding down the road. I didn't see anything. So again, I'm not sure if this is part of a ritual or an urban legend that they're testing, or if they actually saw something. I personally don't see anything. If you do see something, let me know in the comments, but I didn't see it. So that's the only part that's unclear, is if this person is related to these events and they're purposely trying to summon something, or if it's just someone messing around and they're just trying out an urban legend. And we'll get to, this tape will come back. It's not very important, but I do think that this tape is identified as something later on. So now we're on to tape 3, which is called Orientation Protocols. And this is a good old-fashioned analog horror training video. And we see that the training video is for Alexander Marsh. That name will come back, people. Remember Alexander Marsh. If you don't remember anything else I've said so far, remember Alexander Marsh. And this appears, it's like an army training video, and we're introduced to something called Project Stargate, which is ran, enforced, worked by Unit 13. And in this video, we find out, apparently there's a lot of speculation around what they do, and so they're here to clear the air on what actually happens within this project and within this unit. We're introduced to what are called thought forms. Thought forms are physical manifestation of a person's emotions, thoughts, desires, etc. Sometimes they're just like misty, ghost-like figures, and other times they're fully corporeal. The catch is they can also be formed unintentionally. And it's alluded to that, for example, ghosts of our loved ones that have passed are actually thought forms that we have created through our grief. So, like, if someone is wound up enough, upset, if you have any sort of spike in emotion, my understanding is you can create these without meaning to, which, as you can assume, is very dangerous. So, of course, because of the hubris of man, they created technology to extract these forms from people's minds. And, spoiler kids, it ain't going well. This distortion on every single time they try to assure us is very telling. Anytime they try to say, it's fine, we have it under control, it's distorted. So sure, Jan. And then at the end, we get a list of side effects, which is, again, never good in analog horror. It never means anything good. But they say to be wary of symptoms like memory loss, stomach problems, so on and so forth. So that's, after using this or like, creating a thought form, those are things that you have to look forward to. So now we're on to tape 4, which is called Unexpected Visitors. And in tape 4, we open on the external of someone's home, and it appears as though whoever's operating the camera is casing the place, that they're obviously like trying to break in. And once the lights in the house go dark, they appear to take off a window screen and enter a bedroom. Remember this because I have a theory about what this is. The intruder enters what appears to be a bedroom. We hear screams from off camera. And then we cut to the intruder walking outside and zooming in on the moon, which, remember that as well. These two things will come back. So remember, they enter a room that has a big wooden door. And then after they exit the home, they zoom in on the moon. We're then shown a clip of the Max Headroom show. And yes, I'm serious. Which is interrupted by an alert from the emergency broadcast system. We're told that something like over 40 homes have been impacted by these break-ins, and it's inferred that what we saw in the previous footage within this video was one of those said break-ins. Citizens are urged to shelter in place, to lock all the doors and windows, and to grab weapons to protect themselves. After the alert, we cut to someone who has their window open, and we hear what appears to be screams of people being attacked throughout town. And in one of the most chilling moments, and it's so subtle, this person goes to close their window, and a gloved hand reaches through and grabs it, so they can't close it. And there's something about that out of almost everything in this series, that's the part that scares me the most. Because can you imagine just like having your window open, hearing all of this, we hear the emergency broadcast in the background, and this is real, by the way. Like, the home invasion part and this part are real footage, and like live action footage. And you go to shut your window when you realize it, but you realize it a second too late, and that's so chilling to me. So after the hand reaches through, the video ends. So now we're on to tape 5, which is called Not Here, Not Now, Not Anymore. And this is the video that I will give a trigger warning for anything around miscarriage, because again, I'm not doing a good job of explaining it, but there's not a miscarriage, but I feel like something like this that happens, it's paranormal, could be very triggering about losing a baby, because a baby is literally lost. Like, I mean, it's there and then it's not. And so I just feel like it could be triggering. So fair warning going into this. So in tape 5, we open on 2 women talking, and we come to find out that it's a conversation between an ultrasound tech and a pregnant woman there for a sonogram. The screen glitches / the power seems to surge during the ultrasound. And when the power comes back on, the baby is no longer there. It's the screen where the baby should be. There's nothing. And the ultrasound tech tries to reassure the woman as she begins panicking. And we learn her name is Tiffany Crisaldi from a newspaper clipping for her obituary, because I would assume, unsubscribed from the channel of life. But I couldn't make out what happened to her. It's just alluded to that this loss of her baby. Yeah. And so the one big important piece here, she had been dating and was engaged to Alexander Marsh, who, if you remember the training tape from earlier, we saw his training tape. So, and I will do a timeline later, this is 1987. His training tape says it's from 1993. So just to throw out a couple dates here. So then we move to tape 6, which is called Sleeping Dogs. And in Sleeping Dogs, we begin with a talk from Dr. Bernard T. Hayes. Goodness gracious. Who talks about how man should be able to basically look God in the eye as an equal. Like, we will get to a place where, like, we will have godlike power, is essentially, you know, just casual, is what he's talking about. Almost a Tower of Babel situation. So then we cut back to the same Simiodine user from the first video. It's the same style where it's like someone trying to enter the database. And we are welcomed as Frank Porter, which that name will also come back, before the creds are once again overridden. So the need for credentials are overridden. We hack into the system where we are able to receive Paul Morelli's messages to Frank Porter. We learn that Paul, he owns a construction company, and they've been hired to work in some tunnels. It seems like they're excavating some tunnels. And once Paul's team is in there, it seems like the tunnels have altars and carvings and inscriptions within them. And it gets worse because members of the crew begin to fall sick. And they have all of the side effects we mentioned earlier in the training video. They're having stomach issues, flu-like symptoms, memory loss. Yeah, it's not great. And so one of the men within the crew, his name is Arnold Rivers. One day when they are excavating, they find what seemed to be like some really, really ancient tools and weaponry. And so Arnold used to be an archaeologist of some sort, and he actually offers to take them and to examine them, see what they could be, so on and so forth. Arnold will also come back around. Again, this is an analog horror series, so any name you hear, just write it down. So Paul, within these voicemails, becomes increasingly worried. He and his crew then begin to see creatures. Their food is spoiling at a rate it shouldn't be. And then all of the men begin dropping like flies. And some of them are borderline, if not fully comatose. Like, they are unresponsive. And Paul can't get a hold of any of their emergency contacts 911. The only person that he can get through to is Frank. That is allegedly the only voicemail that's working. Like, everything else is just ringing. And at this point, we're a few voicemails in. It's clear Paul is being infected by the same thing as his team. The little photo they have up of Paul to show us what he looks like, his image has been deteriorating. It's clear in this voicemail, this last voicemail, that he has fully succumbed to whatever this condition is. He tells Frank that his skin feels tight and that his teeth feel like they're humming. And he begins to laugh maniacally and in a crazed fashion. And his speech just kind of becomes guttural. Cut throughout this, we also see intermittent footage of what appears to be a thought form. And it's just kind of a misty entity, kind of like a shape. It almost looks like a cookie cutter, like a little gingerbread cookie cutter, messing with the camera. And finally, we're left with a mutilated version of Frank's bleeding face and screams before we catch another glimpse of a masked entity on the external camera. So yeah, so things are not looking really great. So then we have tape 7, which is only about a minute and a half long as well, and it's called Back to Normal. So in tape 7, we're met with a news report stating that all of the break-ins were part of some organized crime group. People have been arrested. Everything's fine now. Les sigh. It's not. It's clear. And the reporter's audio becomes distorted, much like in the training video when they're trying to reassure us. His voice becomes very distorted, discombobulated, until we cut to a clip of what appears to be a set of conjoined twins crying. And I am not 100% sure if this is Tiffany's baby. His name is Max. I'm not sure if this has something to do with Max. That would be my guess. But for now, all we have is it's a set of... They appear to be conjoined twins, and they're crying. And then a mutilated face, much like Paul's, is superimposed over the reporters as the word liar pops up on the screen next to him. So, in fact, things are not back to normal, and everything is not all right. So then we have tape 8, which is our penultimate tape. And it's also the longest tape in the series. It's almost 18 minutes long. And this video reveals so much. So we pick up right after the events of tape 7. News executives are fighting about the signal disruption. It's confirmed that the newscast was hijacked. So what we saw seems to be what the public saw. And GBS, which is the name of the fictional network all of this is transpiring on, the executive yells at one of the producers to find Don Wright, who was the reporter that we saw earlier, but it appears that no one can find him, and they need him to make a statement about what happened. So then we're back to Semiodyne, and we're able to get a piece of footage that, according to them, should not exist. They flat out say, they call it oh my gosh, let me see if I can say this. It's an anomaly. An anomalous file? That doesn't sound right in my English head. Yeah, like in my English writing head, that doesn't sound right. But it's a file that's an anomaly and should not be there. So here we uncover Arnold Rivers' audio recording. And if you remember, Arnold was the man who used to be an archaeologist who told Paul that he would take those artifacts and study them. So we find his audio recordings, and it turns out Arnold did not tell Paul at the time, but Arnold was actually supposed to report to Frank Porter, who, if you remember from earlier, those are the voicemails that that's the voicemail that Paul was reaching, was to Frank Porter. That's who the Semiodyne Network initially stated that we were. And so he had kept that hidden from Paul. So these artifacts are super old, like 11,000 BCE old. And it's revealed that these tunnels exist throughout Mount Greylock, aka the name of our series. So it turns out, we find out through Arnold's accounts, people have been traveling here essentially since the dawn of man to make offers to some sort of ancient entity. And so then we briefly cut to, it seems like something akin to what you'd see on the History Channel, where we learn that billions and billions of years ago, a planet collided with Earth before it, it was just like molten rock. A planet collided with ours, and they hit with such force that pieces of this planet aligned with our moon. And so if you remember back in tape 4, the invader zooms in on the moon. That's what I believe this is referencing, is that whatever these pieces were in this other planet are, I think, part of this entity, and I think that it's within the moon. There's something within the moon. And I want to call out something here, because if you remember, so right before that History Channel clip plays, there's a menu that's akin to, you've seen it in tons of, if you had cable, the programming block screen, it's there within Local 58. It's a staple of analog horror. It's in Midwest Angelica, you know what I'm talking about. There's a 10 p.m. series called Night Hiking, episode 13, Mount Greylock. I believe this is the footage from tape 2. I believe what we were seeing was footage from that show. I couldn't find anything that confirmed this, but I think it's a fair assumption based on the title of the show, based on that footage from tape 2. That's what I think. So moving back. So let's bring it back in. So after we see that History Channel clip, someone named Liam calls 911 as we see another image of the reporter, Don Wright, from the previous tape and cut to his mutilated corpse. Just you see his face, but it's not pretty. And this is verified because on the 911 call, the man, Liam, he's the producer that GBS executive is arguing with. So Dawn has been and so that is why we saw the mutilated face superimposed as he was. So then we cut back to Arnold, and he continues to talk about all the things he saw within these tunnels and chambers, and it seems as though there's some entity that has been worshipped since the dawn of time, but it also needs some sort of human sacrifice to appease it. And so Arnold calls Frank with all of these concerns and is basically like, bro, what is this? Like, what are we uncovering? What is going on here? There are things you're not telling me because this has existed for eons. And Frank wants to continue with the research. He tries to sweet talk Arnold, offer him everything imaginable. And Arnold's like, no. And so then we find out what happened to the crew, to Paul's crew. And it's not pretty. These images are really gruesome. It shows the befores and the afters. They're all mutilated. They're all really jacked up. You only see the neck up. It's not anything crazy. But we can assume it seems as though they're being studied by Semiodyne. Some of them can't speak. Some of them are comatose. Some are hazardous to be around. And not as in they're dangerous. They're that too. But like they're emitting like toxins. And for some of them, you have to be in full hazmat to even interact with them. Some people are prone to violent outbursts. Some are said to have cannibalistic tendencies. Some can basically glamour people like a vampire, like convince you to do things you wouldn't normally do. You name it. And so, just a fair warning, they are gnarly. And kind of, it reminded me of like the Russian sleep experiment, but worse. So just a fair warning, they're gnarly to look at. So if you're bothered by gore, you might want to fast forward if you've watched this at all. And so then we go back to Arnold, and Frank asks him a second time, tries to convince him. Arnold's like, no. And it seems at first like Frank is fine with it. Frank's like, okay. But then Arnold starts to believe he's being followed as he returns home. His front door is unlocked. He specifically remembers locking it. Lights that he either had turned off or are now on, or lights that were on are now off. And there are just things he remembers like vividly leaving in a specific state, are now no longer in that state. So while he is recording these audio files to us, his house is broken into, and the closet he hides in, this is my next theory, the door looks suspiciously like the big wooden door in tape 4. So I believe the break-in we saw in tape 4 was the one into Arnold's house. That's what I believe. And then a person or a thing with the same mask we saw in tape 6 when I told you about the masked figure, it's that same mask. And Arnold unfortunately gets got. We don't see it. It happens off camera. But he gets got. And the video ends with a childlike voice saying it's a monster and giggling. And when he's trying to get Arnold out of this closet, in the words of Loie Lane, it sounds like a flesh pedestrian trying to, it's not, it's, ugh, I have the chills. So, before Arnold, right before he gets got, he's pretty aware of what's about to happen. So he says if anything happens, to be sure to get these tapes and all of this audio to Jim Melgren. He's an investigator. So, that name will come back, not within the videos, but within a theory I have later on. So now we have, as of the time of recording, the 9th and final tape. Like with Midwest Angelica, like with all of the Analog Horror series we follow and track here, when we get updates, we'll definitely talk about them in videos and we'll also update the pieces, so don't worry. But at the time of recording this, there are only 9 videos, and the 9th video is called Trojan Technology. So in Trojan Technology, we go all the way back to the 1960s, and LBJ has started this initiative to have devices placed into every home across the country, with devices as small as flashlights to things as big as telephones. And it's done under the guise of better connecting us as a nation, to giving households access to technology they might not have otherwise. But obviously something's bigger, because the sponsor of this program is Simiodine. Yikes. And it also may seem as though Simiodine might have had something to do with what happened to JFK, as he was not having any part of this initiative and he would not play ball. So it's alluded to that they may have had something to do with what happened to JFK, which is crazy. I'm like, it's giving big monument mythos energy. So the head of Simiodine is talking about this initiative and why it's important, and in between that, there are intermittent cuts of surveillance footage that at first seem harmless until we reach one from October 1990. And it's cut to what I believe to be, it looks like a dry erase board. It might be just a big piece of paper, but on it, it essentially says this whole program was a trap, and essentially everybody can suck it. I try not to swear on this channel, so use your imagination of how you tell someone off when you're not pleased with them. And it says to do that to Simiodine, LBJ, everybody. Like, this whole thing was a trap, and they're tired of being their lab rat. I have a theory about this that we will get to at the end. But so we're like, okay. Then there are some time jumps throughout the footage, so just fair warning if you're like, why are we talking about the 60s now? We're about to talk about 1993. That's just how the footage is. So then we cut to one of the intermittent pieces of footage. It's from September 13th, 1993. We see a shadow in front of a closet door that opens slowly, and then we are jump scared to high heaven with audio from the speech. So fair warning, it's one of the biggest jump scares in the entire series, is this jump scare, because you see it slowly pull, it's ugh. So then we cut to December 29th, 1994. And this, like, hellish figure slowly stands up in the dark and starts whispering to someone named Katie. Judging by her voice, I wouldn't put her over, like, 10 or 11. The creature tells her that it's her imaginary friend. She says she doesn't have one, and it says that she probably just doesn't remember. And then she asks if it's from the doctor's office place she had to go to, which is more than likely one of the extraction chambers that was mentioned in Alexander's training tape. And the entity confirms. He says something like, I think you might be right about that. And it's... the voice acting on this creature is phenomenal. So like Velma, like our favorite crime-solving lesbian, Velma Dinkley, poor Katie cannot see without her glasses. So the creature tells her that it'll give her her glasses so that she can see it, because she says that she can't really see it. And of course it's a trap, and the camera glitches, and when it turns back on, it's covered in what appears to be blood. And finally, we cut to May 10th of 1987, where we hear Alexander and Tiffany's voicemail. And just again, the same Alexander Marsh and Tiffany Crisaldi from previous tapes. It's their voicemail. And that's how the video ends. So here's time-wise, here's what I can offer you. Here's what I've been able to put together, because as we know, I get obsessive with research. C'est la vie. So Tiffany, according to her obituary, died in 1987. So I believe the clip of she and Alexander's voicemail was from around this time, more than likely close to when she died, if not before. Secondly, the tape on Alexander's training tape it says it was made January 2nd or 3rd of 1993, is what the little image at the FBI warning at the bottom says. So from what I can make out, I think Alexander, my theory is, started working for them after Tiffany's death. Thirdly, I believe Alexander is the one hacking into the system. I know that it could have easily been Frank, since his name is brought up, but see, his credentials are overridden, and we just get the voicemails from his account. I know that it could be technically Arnold before he was, but I don't think so. The other person who could be hacking it is investigator Jim Melgren, who Arnold said to give all the tapes to. But for some reason, my gut's just kind of telling me it's Alexander. I think that Alexander plays a bigger part in this. I know that it could be risky if he and Tiffany's baby was somehow brought about by Semiodyne. I could see him trying to do this in a vengeful way. I know that that gets a little messy, because how would you be able to go work for them if you were, like, against them? But I'm kind of leaning towards that, and once we finish up the timeline, I'll go into my theories a little bit further. So fourthly, the calls Paul makes to Frank, Paul being the leader of the construction crew, they are from March 24th, 1987 through March 30th, 1987. So basically, the nexus for this universe is 1987. This means Arnold's would have also occurred in 1987, soon after these voicemails. And additionally, all of the photos of the crew were taken in the spring of 1987, when we have the video where we see what happened. So, I think 1987 is the apex of everything. So I think that that's our big year. And so here's my take of a rough timeline of what happened. I think in March of 1987, the tunnels were unearthed. I believe soon after Arnold was killed. I believe the break-ins all happened within this same spring of 1987. And y'all can rag on me all you want to, but I think this is what we were supposed to have done. So Max Headroom ran on ABC in the US from 1987 to 1988. I think it was specifically put in here as a clue to the timeline, which I believe to be 1987. I think that is when all of these major events happen. That's when Tiffany passed away. That's when Arnold passed away. I think 1987 is the nexus of everything. I think this is all spring to early summer of 1987. So, my closing out theories based on tape 9. Semiodyne has been running surveillance since 1963-1964 because LBJ was president. And it's alluded to that JFK, there's some tension between he and the founder of Semiodyne. So I believe this happened 1963-1964. This means Tiffany and Alexander have been watched for most of their lives. The part of the video where it basically tells everybody to suck it is from 1990, 3 years after Tiffany's death, and 3 years before his training tape. I still think Alexander wrote this message, but that would put a little kink in the plan that I think he went to work for them in 1993, and I'm not sure how he could have gone undercover by using his same name. And the training tape is made out to Alexander Marsh. So I think that he either convinced them he was on their side and did like a whole double cross, or there's someone else within the series who is working with him, because we also had the mention of that group that they blamed for the break-ins. So I think Alexander and this person are linked, at the very least, if Alexander did not write that "go fly a kite" message. So the closet video, however, within tape 9, when it has the shadow in the closet opens, that is from 1993, the same year Alexander received his training video. Therefore, I do think that that has to do with Alexander. I do think that video, I think that that is his thought form, or he is involved with the person in the mask. Because the person in the mask, I believe, to be the same entity. I think every time we see that masked person, it's the same person. So, those are my theories on Alexander Marsh. I think he's a key player in this. I'm not 100% sure. I think we're going to need a little bit more, I just like, my brain just like became jello jiggling on a plate. I think we're going to need a little bit more info, but that's what I think so far. And then finally, I don't have any theories for Katie yet, Katie being the girl from tape 9. I just don't think we have enough info. It could be as simple as she was just a way to illustrate how dangerous the thought forms were, / to show how powerful they are. I toyed around for 1 second thinking maybe she's Alexander's future daughter, but the timeline just doesn't quite add up. So I think that either Katie has not been revealed yet, like her origin, or she was simply, it was just a person used to show how powerful and how merciless these creatures are. So that's Greylock so far. Again, I'll update the blog. I will keep you posted. I'm on the edge of my seat, like hopefully all of you are. I think this one is great. I got my brother-in-law into it. And again, just I've said it a million times and I'll say it a million more. Look to YouTube for the future of horror because it's here. 1,000%. And so if you like this piece, it's obviously from this week's blog. If you love and want more analog horror content, we have pieces on Liminal Land. We have a piece on Welcome Home. We have a piece on Project Earth. We have a piece on Harmony and Horror. So if you love analog horror, there are tons of pieces over for you over on the bmovies blog. So just to recap for this week, Evil Dead series, Saw, No One Will Save You review, movies I think should get the Bring It On Cheer or Die treatment, feminine horror reimaginings, and tomorrow we will release Greylock. You're going to get 7 pieces of content throughout October. Right now, we are just planning to do this for October. We may reevaluate in the future and go up to 7 pieces, but for right now, it's just going to be October, 7 days of content. After October, we'll go back to 5 pieces and then your Bite-Size Sunday, so it'll be 6 pieces of weekly content, technically. And Bite-Size Sundays will return to just 1 piece of content per post. Again, Bite-Size Sunday, you only get the hint here, and those are exclusive to Instagram. You can read all of these blogs over at bmovies.blog, which will always be in the description box. You follow me on Instagram at Lisa_Frankenstein. I post multiple times a day during October. It's my favorite time of the year. I put out a warning for people to mute me if they don't want to see multiple posts. So if you love October like I do, please give me a follow. Please give Elliot a follow. She is our editor, my collaborator, one of my soul sisters, one of my ride or dies. And you can follow her bookstagram at reading.with.read. I know that Elliot, like I've talked about this before, Elliot may not appear on camera, but Elliot does so much behind the scenes. She edits, we work through ideas together, and she does so much. So just shout out to Elliot. I can't believe we've done 100 pieces. That's crazy. At this point, over 100, and we're getting close to our year, which is wild. So be sure to give all those things a follow. Give us a follow on Instagram at bmovies channel. That's where you can find Bite-Size Sundays as well as daily posts. I post every single day with links to the blog as well as a blog roundup on Fridays, which will be moving to Saturdays just for the month of October. So just a heads up there. If it's Friday and you don't see a blog roundup, since Saturday is technically the last day, we will be moving those to Saturdays just for October. So yeah, I can't wait to share more content with all of you. I'm very excited for this month. And I think with that, all that's left to do is fade to black.